Hey man, there's a version of her the world sees, and then there's the version of her that exists when no one is watching. On the outside, she moves on. She smiles, she laughs, she talks like everything is fine. She convinces herself and everyone around her that she's healed, that she's grown, that she's past it, and maybe in some ways she believes that too. But healing isn't always what it looks like on the surface, because some things don't leave completely, they just go quiet. Because when she lost you, she didn't just lose a person. She lost a version of life that had a certain stability to it. A rhythm, a presence that didn't need to be questioned every day. And that kind of loss doesn't disappear just because time passes, it changes shape. It becomes less obvious but more internal. Something that doesn't interrupt her life but still exists within it. At first, it doesn't feel like loss to her. It feels like relief, space, freedom from something that felt heavy in the moment. And that's what allows her to move forward so easily at the beginning. She's not carrying the same emotional weight you are, because she already started letting go before it ended. So when everything finally stops, it feels like a release, not a loss. But what she doesn't realize yet is that relief fades. It always does, because relief isn't built on something new, it's built on the absence of something old. And once that absence becomes normal, the mind starts looking for something to replace it. And if nothing comes in with the same depth, the space she thought was freedom starts feeling different. And that's when the shift begins. Slowly, quietly, almost unnoticed at first. It doesn't come as emotion right away. It comes as small realizations, moments where something feels off, interactions that don't carry the same weight, conversations that feel empty, even when they shouldn't. And those moments don't seem important individually, but together, they start building something underneath the surface. Because now she's not comparing intentionally, she's just experiencing the difference, and that difference is what changes everything. The way someone shows up, or doesn't, the way effort feels inconsistent, the way connection doesn't hold the same depth, and through that experience, she begins to understand something she didn't fully see before. And that understanding doesn't hit all at once. It builds, through repetition, through contrast, through living without something long enough to recognize what it actually was. And once that recognition forms, it doesn't just disappear, because it's not based on memory, it's based on experience. Because healing, real healing, requires resolution. It requires understanding something fully and letting it go. But in situations like this, there's often no clean resolution, no moment where everything makes sense and closes neatly. Instead, there's a slow realization that comes later, when things have already moved forward, and that's why she can look fine, even feel fine, most of the time, but still carry something underneath it, because what she's carrying isn't always obvious, it's not loud, it doesn't show up in every moment, but it's there, in the way certain things feel different now, in the way something is missing that she can't quite replace. So no, she may not look like she's struggling, she may not act like she's affected, she may even believe she's healed, but some losses don't leave completely. They just become part of you in a way that shows up later when you least expect it. At a certain point, what she thought was healing starts revealing itself as something else entirely. Not because she's doing anything wrong, but because time has a way of exposing what was never fully resolved. The distractions fade, the newness of life without you settles into routine, and what's left is just her. Her thoughts, her patterns, her quiet moments where nothing is pulling her attention outward. And in those moments, there's a subtle awareness that doesn't go away as easily as everything else did. Not loud enough to disrupt her life, but present enough to be felt when things slow down. Because now, she's no longer reacting to the breakup, she's living in the reality of it. And reality is slower, quieter, more honest. It doesn't come with emotional highs or dramatic lows, it comes with consistency. And in that consistency, she starts noticing what's missing. Not in a dramatic way, but in a way that becomes harder to ignore over time. The absence of someone who showed up the same way every day. The absence of a presence that didn't feel temporary. The absence of something that felt grounded instead of uncertain. And this is where the difference between moving on and healing becomes clear. Because moving on is external. It's what people see. It's the new experiences, the new connections, the way she presents herself to the world. But healing is internal. It's what happens when everything slows down and there's nothing left to distract from what's underneath. And if something was never fully understood, never fully processed, it doesn't disappear, it just becomes quieter. So even as she continues forward, there are moments that catch her off guard, not because she's thinking about you directly, but because something doesn't feel the way she expected it to. A conversation feels shallow when it should feel deeper. An interaction feels temporary when it should feel stable. And in those moments, there's a quiet recognition that something she once experienced hasn't been replaced in the same way, and that recognition is where it stays. Not as a constant thought, not as something she dwells on every day, but as something that surfaces in specific moments over and over again. Because once you've experienced something that felt real, something that carried depth, consistency and presence, you don't just forget what that felt like. Even if you move on, there's always a part of you that recognizes when something doesn't match it. And that's why it doesn't fully leave her, because it's no longer about you as a person, it's about what you represented, a certain kind of stability, a certain kind of presence, a certain way of showing up that most people don't maintain over time. And once she understands that, even if it comes slowly, it becomes part of how she sees everything moving forward. Because understanding, when it comes from experience, doesn't fade the way emotions do. Emotions rise and fall, they come and go, but understanding stays. It becomes part of your perspective. It changes how you interpret things, how you feel about situations, how you recognize what's real and what's not. And that kind of shift doesn't just disappear with time. And the hardest part for her is that this understanding comes without a clear way to resolve it. It's not something she can go back and fix easily. Time has already passed, things have already changed, and the version of you she knew isn't something she can just step back into. And that's what makes it heavier, because it's tied to something she can't simply recreate. So instead of becoming something she expresses, it becomes something she carries quietly. It shows up in the way she feels when something is missing, in the way she notices differences she didn't notice before, in the way certain moments feel incomplete without her fully understanding why. And that quiet awareness is what makes it stay. And that's the truth most people don't talk about. Healing doesn't always mean forgetting. Sometimes it just means learning to live with something that never fully leaves, something that stays in the background, shaping how everything else feels from that point on. At this point, what she's carrying isn't something that comes and goes anymore. It becomes part of how she naturally experiences everything without needing to think about it. It's not about you showing up in her thoughts every day. It's about the shift that happened inside her when she lived long enough without what she once had. That shift changed how things feel now. It changed how she senses effort, how she recognizes consistency, how she notices when something is missing, even if everything looks fine on the surface. And once that kind of internal change happens, it doesn't reverse itself just because time passes. Because now, every new connection she experiences carries a quiet layer of awareness underneath it. Not a direct comparison she consciously makes, but a feeling she can't ignore when something doesn't reach the same level. She might meet someone who says the right things, who shows interest, who creates moments that should feel exciting. But over time, when those moments don't hold, when the consistency fades, when the depth doesn't develop, she feels the difference. And that difference traces back to what she once experienced, whether she acknowledges it or not. And this is where it becomes clear that what she lost wasn't just a person, it was a reference point, a standard that she didn't recognize while she had it, but now can't ignore. Because once you've experienced something that felt grounded, something that didn't leave you questioning everything, something that showed up without needing to be chased, it becomes something you recognize when it's missing. And that recognition doesn't fade. Because now, she doesn't just look at what's in front of her, she feels whether it aligns with something deeper. And when it doesn't, even slightly, there's a quiet dissatisfaction that forms, not enough to disrupt everything, but enough to remind her that something she once had carried a level of depth she isn't experiencing now. And that reminder doesn't need to be constant to be real. It just needs to show up enough to stay. And the hardest part for her is that this understanding came too late to feel simple. Because now it's not just about recognizing what she lost, it's about knowing she chose to walk away from it. That she made a decision based on how she felt in the moment, without fully seeing what that decision meant long term. And that kind of realization doesn't just sit lightly, it settles in a way that stays. But even with that awareness, it doesn't always turn into action, because time has created distance, and distance creates uncertainty. She doesn't know where you stand now, doesn't know if things could even go back, doesn't know if reaching out would lead to something real, or just reopen something that already ended. And that uncertainty keeps everything internal instead of external. So instead of expressing it, she carries it, not in a way that controls her, but in a way that quietly influences her. It shows up in the way she hesitates, in the way she observes more, in the way she becomes more aware of what's real and what isn't. And that awareness is what makes it permanent. Because once you've understood something through experience, not through words, not through explanation, but through actually living it, it becomes part of how you see everything. It shapes your perspective, your expectations, your ability to recognize what holds value. And that kind of understanding doesn't disappear, it becomes part of you. And the truth is, she may never fully articulate it. She may never say, "I didn't heal from losing him." She may never even consciously frame it that way. But internally, there will always be a part of her that recognizes that something she once had hasn't been replaced in the same way. And that recognition is what makes it stay. And in the end, that's what it really means when she never fully heals from losing you. Not that she's stuck, not that she can't move on, but that she carries an understanding that doesn't leave, a quiet awareness that something she experienced once set a standard that everything after it will be measured against whether she wants it to or not. At this stage, what she carries isn't something she actively thinks about anymore. It becomes something that operates in the background of how she feels about things without needing to be brought to the surface. It's not about remembering you directly, it's about the shift that happened when she had to live without what she once had. That shift created a level of awareness that now exists without effort. It shows up in how she interprets behavior, how she senses whether something is real or temporary, how she feels when something lacks depth, even if everything looks fine on the outside. And that kind of awareness, once it's there, doesn't fade. Because now, she doesn't experience connections the same way she used to. There's a quiet sensitivity in her perception that wasn't there before. She notices when effort fades over time, when consistency isn't maintained, when something starts strong but doesn't hold. And even if she doesn't consciously connect it back to you, there's a part of her that recognizes the difference, not through memory, but through feeling. And feeling, especially when it's built through real experience, doesn't lie. And that's what makes it permanent, because it's no longer tied to emotion alone, it's tied to understanding. She understands now that not everything that looks good at the beginning turns into something real. She understands that consistency over time matters more than temporary intensity. She understands that presence, the kind that doesn't disappear when things get difficult, is rare. And once she understands that, she can't go back to not knowing it. But what makes it heavier is the awareness that she didn't fully see that while she had it. That the very thing she now recognizes as valuable was something she once treated as normal. And that kind of realization doesn't just pass through her, it settles, because it's tied to her own perception at the time, her own choices, her own way of interpreting what was in front of her. Because if it was just about missing you, it would fade. If it was just about emotion, it would pass. But when it becomes about understanding what you represented, what your presence actually meant in ways she didn't fully grasp at the time, it turns into something deeper, something that doesn't rely on constant feeling, but on perspective. And that perspective becomes something she carries into every future situation, not in a way where she's constantly comparing everything to you, but in a way where she knows what a certain level of connection feels like. And once you know that, you can't unknow it. You can't experience something less without feeling the gap, even if you don't fully explain it to yourself. So even as she continues forward, even as life moves on, even as she builds new experiences, there will always be moments where that awareness surfaces again. Not loudly, not emotionally, but in a quiet recognition that something she once had hasn't been replaced in the same way. And that recognition is what keeps it alive. And the truth is, she may never act on it. She may never come back, never reach out, never express what she realized. Because by now, too many things have changed. Time has created distance, pride has created hesitation, and uncertainty has created doubt. And all of that keeps the realization internal, instead of turning it into action. So what she's left with isn't something dramatic, it's something quiet. A steady awareness that something she experienced once carried more depth, more stability, more presence than she understood at the time. And that awareness becomes part of how she sees everything that comes after. And in the end, that's what it really means when she never fully heals from losing you. Not that she's stuck in the past, but that she carries a standard she didn't recognize while she had it, one that continues to shape how everything else feels long after you're gone. At this point, what she carries isn't tied to you as a person anymore. It becomes something broader, something that quietly reshapes how she experiences connection itself. Because once someone has gone through the process of losing something and only understanding its value later, it doesn't just stay attached to that one situation, it spreads into how they see everything else. It changes how they interpret effort, how they recognize consistency, how they feel when something is either real or just temporary. And that shift, once it settles in, doesn't reverse itself. Because now, she doesn't just experience people at face value. There's a layer underneath every interaction, something that quietly evaluates what's actually being shown over time. She notices when effort fades, when words don't align with actions, when something feels exciting in the beginning but doesn't hold. And even if she doesn't consciously connect those feelings back to you, there's a part of her that recognizes the difference between what she's experiencing now and what she once had. And that's where it becomes deeper than emotion, because emotion can pass, but contrast stays. It's not about sitting there missing you, it's about living in the present and feeling when something doesn't match a level she now understands. And that understanding came from experience, from living through something that felt grounded, consistent, and real, and then having to exist without it. But what makes it even heavier is that this awareness comes with no clear way to resolve it, because by now, too much time has passed. The version of you she knew, the dynamic you shared, the way things felt when everything was still intact, doesn't exist in the same way anymore. And that creates a kind of permanence, because it's not something she can simply return to. Because if realization came earlier, it could have been acted on, it could have led to change, to communication, to something being fixed. But when it comes later, after everything has already moved forward, it becomes something internal instead. Something she understands but can't easily change. And that's why it doesn't leave her, because it's not tied to a moment, it's tied to perspective. She sees things differently now. She understands what consistency actually looks like, what real effort feels like, what stability in a connection truly means. And once that perspective is there, it becomes part of how she moves through everything else. So even if she continues her life, builds new experiences, meets different people, there will always be moments where that awareness shows up again. Not loudly, not emotionally, but in a quiet recognition that something she once experienced hasn't been fully replaced. And that recognition is what keeps it alive. And the truth is, she may never fully admit it. Not to you, not to anyone, maybe not even to herself, in a clear way. Because pride, time, and distance all create barriers that keep things unspoken. But unspoken doesn't mean unreal. In fact, the things that stay unspoken often carry the most weight because they never get released. So what she carries forward isn't a visible wound, it's something much quieter. A steady awareness that something she once had held more depth than she realized at the time. And that awareness becomes part of how she feels her way through everything that comes after. And in the end, that's what it really means when she never fully heals from losing you. Not that she's stuck, not that she can't move on, but that she carries a standard she didn't recognize while she had it. One that quietly shapes how everything else feels, in ways that don't go away. At this point, what she carries isn't something she needs to think about anymore. It becomes something that quietly influences how she feels about everything without requiring her attention. It's no longer about you showing up in her thoughts. It's about the internal shift that happened when she had to live without what she once had. That shift changed how she interprets effort, how she senses consistency, how she recognizes when something is either real or just temporary. And once something changes at that level, it doesn't reverse itself just because time passes, because now there's a subtle awareness that follows her into every new situation. Not something loud or obvious, but something that picks up on details she didn't notice before. The way someone shows up over time, the way attention is maintained, the way consistency either holds or slowly fades. And when those things don't align, even slightly, she feels it. Not always in a way she can explain, but in a way that creates a quiet sense that something isn't fully there. And that's what makes this permanent. It's not based on memory, it's based on understanding. Memory fades, emotions shift, people move on, but understanding stays, because it wasn't given to her, it was formed through experience. And experiences that force you to see something clearly, especially after losing it, don't disappear the way temporary emotions do. But what makes it even heavier is the awareness of timing. Because now she understands what she had, but she also understands that she recognized it too late. And timing is something you can't undo. You can't go back and re-experience something with the same conditions, the same perspective, the same version of yourself. And that realization creates a kind of permanence that doesn't need to be revisited to stay real. Because if this was just about emotion, it would fade. If it was just about missing you, it would pass with time. But when it becomes about understanding what your presence actually meant, what kind of stability, consistency, and depth you brought into her life, it turns into something deeper, something that doesn't rely on feeling alone, but on perspective. And that perspective becomes something she carries into everything that comes after. Not in a way where she's constantly comparing every person to you, but in a way where she knows what a certain level of connection feels like. And once you know that, you can't unknow it. You can't experience something less without feeling the difference, even if you don't fully explain it to yourself. So even as she continues forward, even as life moves on, even as she builds new experiences, there will always be moments where that internal awareness surfaces again. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a quiet recognition that something she once had hasn't been replaced in the same way. And that recognition is what keeps it alive. And the truth is, she may never act on it. She may never come back, never reach out, never express what she realized. Because by now, time, pride, and uncertainty have created a distance that isn't easy to close. And that distance keeps everything internal, instead of turning it into action. So what she carries forward isn't something visible, it's something internal. A steady awareness that something she experienced once carried more depth, more stability, more presence than she understood at the time. And that awareness becomes part of how she sees everything moving forward. And in the end, that's what it really means when she never fully heals from losing you. Not that she's stuck in the past, but that she carries a standard she didn't recognize while she had it. One that continues to shape how everything else feels, long after you're gone, in ways that don't fade. At this stage, what she carries isn't something she can point to anymore. It's something that exists in how she feels her way through life, without needing to consciously think about it. It's not about remembering you, not about replaying moments, not about missing you in the traditional sense. It's about the shift that happened when she experienced something real, and then had to exist without it, long enough to understand it. And that kind of understanding doesn't sit on the surface. It embeds itself into how everything else is experienced from that point on, because now there's a quiet sensitivity in her awareness that wasn't there before. She feels when something lacks depth, even if it looks perfect on the outside. She notices when effort fades, even if it starts strong. She senses when something is temporary, even if it feels exciting in the moment. And that sensitivity isn't something she learned through explanation. It's something she developed through contrast, through experiencing what it feels like when something is truly consistent, and then living without it. And that's what makes it permanent, because it's not tied to you as a memory, it's tied to her as a perspective. It becomes part of how she interprets everything, how she evaluates connection, how she responds to situations. And once something becomes part of your perspective like that, it doesn't go away. It doesn't need to be remembered, it's simply there. But what makes it even heavier is that this understanding came without a way to fully resolve it. Because by the time she saw things clearly, everything had already moved forward. The timing was off, the distance had been created, the situation had changed. And that creates a kind of permanence, because it's not something she can go back and experience again in the same way. Because if she had understood it earlier, things might have been different. If she had seen it while she was still in it, maybe she would have valued it differently. But realization doesn't always come when it's needed. Sometimes it comes later, when there's nothing left to change, and that's what makes it stay, because it's tied to something that can't be undone. So instead of becoming something she acts on, it becomes something she lives with. Not in a painful, overwhelming way, but in a quiet, consistent way that shapes how she feels about things moving forward. It changes what she notices, what she values, what she questions, and that shift becomes part of her, because now she understands something she didn't understand before, that not everything is replaceable, that not every connection can be recreated, that not every experience carries the same depth, even if it looks similar on the surface. And that understanding changes everything about how she approaches life moving forward. And this is where it becomes clear that what happened between you and her didn't just end when the relationship ended. It continued in the way it shaped her awareness, in the way it influenced her perception, in the way it changed how she experiences connection itself. And that kind of impact isn't temporary. It becomes part of how she sees things. And the truth is, she may never fully express it, never admit it, never even consciously break it down. But internally, there will always be a part of her that recognizes that something changed, that something became clearer, deeper, more real than it was before. And that recognition is enough to make it stay. And in the end, that's what it really means when she never heals from losing you. Not that she's stuck, not that she can't move on, but that she carries a quiet, permanent understanding that something she once had shaped how everything else feels in a way that doesn't fade, no matter how much time passes. At this point, what she carries isn't something she can clearly define anymore. It's something she feels without needing to understand it fully. It's not about you showing up in her thoughts, not about replaying what happened. It's about the shift that took place when she had to live without something that once felt natural. That shift created a kind of awareness that doesn't need to be revisited to stay alive. It becomes part of her perception, something that quietly influences how everything else feels without demanding attention. Because now, she doesn't experience connection the same way she used to. There's a subtle layer underneath everything, a quiet filter that senses whether something is real or just temporary. She notices when effort isn't sustained, when presence fades, when something that looks right on the surface doesn't hold over time. And that awareness isn't something she chose, it's something that formed naturally through experience, through having something real and then living long enough without it to understand what it actually was. And that's what makes it permanent, because it's no longer tied to memory or emotion, it's tied to understanding. And understanding doesn't behave the way emotions do. It doesn't rise and fall, it doesn't fade with time, it doesn't disappear when life gets busy. It stays in the background, shaping how things are experienced, without needing to be consciously accessed. Because what she went through wasn't just losing someone, it was being forced into a space where there was nothing to distract from what was missing. And in that space, clarity formed. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually, through repeated moments where something didn't feel the same. And that kind of clarity, once it settles in, doesn't leave. So even as she moves forward, even as life continues, even as new experiences fill her time, there will always be moments where that internal awareness surfaces again. Not loudly, not emotionally, but in a quiet recognition that something she once had hasn't been fully replaced. And that recognition doesn't need to be constant to be real, it just needs to show up enough to stay. And the truth is, she may never fully connect all the dots. She may never sit down and say to herself, "This is why I feel this way." But that doesn't mean it isn't there. Because the most real shifts, the ones that actually change how you experience life, are often the ones that happen beneath conscious thought. Because people don't forget what changes them internally, even if they don't talk about it, even if they don't fully understand it, even if they move forward outwardly without looking back. The shift still happened, the awareness still formed, and that awareness continues to influence how they move through everything that comes after. And that's why what you represented in her life doesn't just disappear when you're no longer there. It transforms into something else, something less visible but more lasting, a reference point, a standard, a feeling she recognizes when it's missing, even if she can't always explain why. And the truth is, she may never come back, never reach out, never express what she realized, because by now, too much time has passed, too much has changed, and life has moved forward in ways that aren't easy to reverse. But internally, that doesn't erase what happened, it just means it stays with her in a quieter way. And in the end, that's what it really comes down to. Not whether she says it, not whether she shows it, not whether she ever acts on it, but the fact that she carries something that doesn't leave, a quiet, permanent understanding that what she once had shaped how everything else feels in a way that time doesn't undo and distance doesn't erase.